Chapter 1. The low hum of the Vigilant as engines vibrated through the floors, a constant reminder of the vastness beyond. Captain Elijah Wolfe stood at the front of the bridge, eyes fixed on the flickering hologram before him. The view of the nearby star system was calm, peaceful even, exactly what it should be. Yet, despite the serene sight of planets rotating in their orbits, a tight knot of tension had formed in Wolfe's chest. As commander of Earth's defense fleet, the weight of every decision, every mission, rested on his shoulders. And today, the knot in his chest only tightened. His first officer, Lieutenant Mira Rios, stood beside him, equally quiet, watching the same stars through the large observation window. She'd been with him long enough to know when something wasn't right. "Something on your mind, Captain?" she asked without turning, her voice a mix of curiosity and concern. Wolfe didn't reply immediately. The hum of the Vigilant was almost too soothing, as if the ship itself were unaware of the storm brewing just beyond the horizon. He ran a hand through his short-cropped hair and sighed, glancing over at Mira. "We've been here before, haven't we?" he muttered, his eyes now shifting to the data panel. "A few years ago, Earth was a second-rate player in the galactic arena. Now we're this close to a confrontation with the Exocrom." Mira gave a small, rueful smile, though she didn't disagree. Earth had come a long way in a short period. Only a decade ago, humans were seen as primitive, isolated on their homeworld with a few scattered colonies. But in the years since, they'd shown the galaxy that humanity was more than capable of carving out a place of influence. They had fought for their seat in the Galactic Council, and now, here they were, holding their ground, respected but not without enemies. Before Mira could respond, an urgent chime interrupted the silence. The comms officer's voice came over the intercom, crackling slightly with static. "Captain Wolfe, you're needed in the conference room immediately. Priority message from the Galactic Council." Wolfe's gaze sharpened. "Understood," he said, before turning to Mira. "Come with me." The pair walked briskly down the narrow corridors of the Vigilant, their footsteps echoing off the walls. Wolfe's mind churned with possibilities, but none of them were good. As they reached the conference room, Wolfe stepped inside, his expression unreadable. Around the large table sat key military leaders and council representatives, all tense. Captain Wolfe, General Uriah, the gruff military strategist, nodded in acknowledgement. "Glad you could join us." Wolfe took his seat at the head of the table, glancing around at the serious faces of those gathered. Something was happening, and it wasn't good. The transmission flickered on, a familiar symbol flashing across the screen. An insignia of the Exocrom, one of the most feared and ruthless races in the galaxy. Wolfe's heart skipped a beat. The hologram solidified into a tall, armored figure, an Exocrom, with black, reflective armor that gleamed with an eerie sheen. The figure was silent for a long moment, simply standing there, surveying the room. Wolfe's eyes narrowed, but he remained still, waiting. Then the voice came, cold, clipped, and utterly emotionless. "This is High Executor Zoreth, Supreme Commander of the Exocrom Dominion." The voice boomed, sending a shiver down the spines of everyone in the room. "Humanity's claim on this galaxy has been an unfortunate oversight. I am here to correct that mistake." Wolfe felt the weight of those words. He couldn't tell if Zoreth was mocking them or speaking with a chilling certainty, but either way, it didn't matter. The Exocrom were here. The war had begun. "We've made it clear before," Zoreth continued, "that Earth's place in the Galactic Council is temporary. You have overstayed your welcome." His voice dropped lower, the words now dripping with disdain. "You will be eradicated." The transmission abruptly ended, leaving the room in stunned silence. Wolfe was the first to speak. "Did he just—" "Yes," General Uriah cut him off. "He did. And it's not an empty threat. The Exocrom don't make threats. They act." Wolfe stood, pacing slowly across the room, his hands clasped behind his back, and his mind raced. The Exocrom, despite their brutal nature, had never openly targeted humanity. The Council had been aware of their aggression towards other species, but Earth's influence had, until now, kept them at bay. He stopped in front of the window, staring out at the deep blackness of space. This was no longer just a matter of military tactics. This was a reckoning. "We won't surrender," Wolfe said quietly, his voice steady. "We won't run." There was a long silence as the gravity of his words settled in. Finally, Mira spoke. "We have to act fast. We can't wait for them to arrive at our doorstep." Wolfe nodded. "Agreed. Prepare the fleet. We'll need every ship we have. And we'll need more than just firepower. We need to think smart, not just hard." As the officers around the table began to organize their respective duties, Wolfe felt a surge of pride for his crew. He knew the Exocrom were formidable, but he had something the Exocrom lacked: human ingenuity. "You'll have what you need, Captain," General Urias said, leaning forward. "But we have to understand something. This isn't just a tactical fight. It's a fight for survival. We cannot afford to lose this." Wolfe turned, his gaze unwavering. "I know that better than anyone." They were not ready for a war of this scale. Not yet. Earth's defenses, while strong, were no match for the Exocrom fleet. But Wolfe wasn't about to let humanity fall without a fight. They had something the Exocrom had never accounted for: resilience. The willingness to push forward when everything seemed lost. "Mira," Wolfe said, his voice firm, "get to work. I need a strategy that will take them by surprise. They underestimate us. Let's make sure they don't again." Mira nodded, determination in her eyes. "I'll assemble the team. We'll have a plan within the hour." Wolfe stood at the window for a long time, watching the stars. The Exocrom were coming. But as long as he had breath in his lungs, he wouldn't let them take Earth. "Earth may not be ready for this," he muttered to himself, "but we'll show them what humanity is capable of." End of Chapter 1. The Vigilant cut through the endless void, its engines humming a low, rhythmic beat that echoed through its metal bones. The crew had been working non-stop, scrambling to prepare for the Exocrom's imminent arrival. Commander Wolfe stood at the helm, staring at the massive holographic display of the Earth system, his fingers lightly tapping the controls. A sense of urgency had settled over the ship like a heavy cloak. The first wave of the Exocrom fleet had been detected hours earlier, and the countdown to Earth's defense was ticking down rapidly. "Status update, Lieutenant?" Wolfe asked, his voice sharp but calm. Lieutenant Mira Rios stepped forward, her eyes scanning the numerous displays before her. "The Exocrom fleet is still holding position just outside the asteroid belt. They're not moving, Captain, but we don't know why. They should have started their advance by now." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. It was too quiet, and in his experience, quiet often meant something dangerous was on the horizon. "They're preparing. Whatever it is, they're not rushing." The Vigilant shook slightly as a communications officer's voice broke over the comm. "Captain, we're receiving a signal from the Exocrom fleet. It's a direct transmission." Wolfe's hand gripped the armrest of his command chair. The voice that followed sent a chill through the room. "Captain Wolfe, this is High Executor Zorith. I give you one final chance to surrender. If you do not comply, the destruction of Earth will begin in 1 hour." Zorith's tone was matter-of-fact, as if dictating a simple command, not a declaration of doom. "Does he think we'll just roll over?" General Uriah muttered, standing at the side of the command center. "This isn't just a threat anymore. It's a countdown." Wolfe didn't take his eyes off the transmission, his mind already working through possibilities. "Prepare the fleet for engagement. All ships get into position. We'll meet them head-on." "Understood, Captain," Mira replied, her fingers flying across the console as she relayed orders. The coldness of Zorith's ultimatum still hung in the air as Wolfe turned toward his crew. "This isn't just about strategy. This is about survival. Our survival. Keep your focus. We have one chance to make them regret underestimating us." He didn't need to say more. The crew had all been through worse. They knew what was at stake. Earth's first battle with the Exocrom would be a defining moment. The eyes of the galaxy would be on them. Within minutes, the Vigilant was surrounded by a dozen Earth ships, each of them positioned to intercept the incoming Exocrom fleet. The hum of the engines grew louder as the crew braced for impact. Wolfe sat at his station, his fingers tapping rhythmically against the console as he reviewed the enemy fleet's movements. Despite the high stakes, his mind remained razor-sharp. Enemy ships coming into range, Mira reported, her voice steady. "They're moving faster than expected. Looks like they've recalibrated their attack strategy." Wolfe's eyes flicked to the screen, where the Exocrom fleet now appeared as a cluster of massive warships, dark and ominous, slowly advancing toward Earth. They were slow but precise, like a predator stalking its prey. "Prepare the intercept grid," Wolfe ordered, his gaze still fixed on the approaching fleet. "Let's show them we won't just stand here." The Vigilant and the other ships broke formation and moved into a defensive posture, aligning themselves with the asteroids in the belt. Wolfe's plan was simple: use the asteroid field to their advantage, creating cover and narrowing the Exocrom's targeting options. But it was a risky play. If the Exocrom adapted faster than anticipated, they'd have no place to hide. "Fire on my command," Wolfe said, his tone unwavering. "We have to make the first strike count." The first round of lasers erupted from the Vigilant's cannons, cutting through the dark space toward the leading Exocrom ship. The bright flashes of energy lit up the void, but the enemy ship absorbed the blast with little more than a minor ripple on its hull. Wolfe's jaw tightened. The Exocrom had defensive systems far beyond anything Earth had encountered. "Captain, their shields are holding," Mira reported, watching as the Exocrom warship's shields flickered briefly before stabilizing. "We're not stopping them with direct fire," Wolfe muttered, already shifting tactics in his mind. "Prepare the EMP cannons. We'll disable their weapons systems." He turned to General Uriah. "Move the secondary fleet into position. If we can disrupt their command ship, it will cripple their coordination." Uriah nodded. "On it, Captain." The Vigilant's EMP cannons fired, sending a pulse of energy that slammed into the nearest Exocrom ship. The shockwave rippled through the enemy's shields, momentarily destabilizing their systems. The first glimmer of hope sparked within Wolfe as the Exocrom ship faltered, giving the human fleet a chance to land a direct hit. "Now's our chance," Mira shouted, her hands moving in a blur of commands. The Earth fleet pounced. Lasers and plasma bolts fired with precision, aiming for weak points in the Exocrom ship's hulls. The first ship faltered, its shields collapsing under the onslaught. But it wasn't enough to cripple the fleet. The Exocrom retaliated quickly, their weapons systems coming to life, targeting the human ships with terrifying accuracy. "Shields holding," Lieutenant Davos reported from the tactical station, but the strain in his voice was clear. "They're more aggressive than we anticipated." "Brace for impact," Wolfe said, his voice cold and focused. "Hold the line. We're not backing down." The battle raged on, each side taking and giving blows, but the tide of the fight remained uncertain. The Exocrom, despite their larger numbers and superior technology, had underestimated Earth's ingenuity. Wolfe's strategies, his quick thinking, and the determination of his crew were starting to show results. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. A sudden explosion rocked the Vigilant. Wolfe was thrown forward, catching himself against the console. "Report," he barked. "Direct hit to our starboard side," Mira answered quickly. "Shields are down to 30%. We can't take another one like that. We need to take out their flagship now," Wolfe said through gritted teeth, already formulating a new plan. "All ships, focus fire on the command ship. We'll break their coordination, even if it costs us." "Understood, Captain," General Uriah said, his voice steady despite the chaos. The final moments of the battle came swiftly. The human fleet, battered and bruised, pushed forward with everything they had. Wolfe's gamble paid off. The Exocrom flagship, already damaged, took a series of well-placed hits, finally losing its central command systems. The remaining Exocrom ships began to break formation, their strategic advantage slipping away. But just as victory seemed within reach, Zoratha's voice crackled through the comms. "Do not mistake this for a victory," he said, his voice dripping with venom. "This is only the beginning. Earth will fall." Wolfe clenched his fists, his resolve hardening. "It's not over yet," he muttered. "It's only just begun." As the Exocrom fleet retreated, Earth's battered ships limped back into formation. Wolfe allowed himself a moment to breathe, but only a moment. There was no time for celebration. Not yet. Earth had survived the first wave, but the true fight was still ahead. Chapter 3. The Vigilant was barely holding together, its once pristine hull now scarred by laser burns and debris. Wolfe stood in the quiet aftermath of the battle, his eyes scanning the damage reports streaming across the bridge's hollow display. It was only a matter of time before the Exocrom would return with reinforcements. They couldn't afford to rest. "Captain," Mira Riosa's voice broke through the silence, pulling Wolfe's focus back to the task at hand. "We've gathered data on their weapons and shields. The good news is their energy signature fluctuates at specific intervals. We've identified a weakness." Wolfe turned toward her. "What are we looking at?" Mira stepped forward, her fingers swiftly manipulating the hollow interface. "We've been analyzing their shielding systems. They seem to drain power after each shot. That's our window. If we can time our attacks between their shots, we might be able to breach their defenses." Wolfe considered this. The Exocrom were powerful, but they weren't invincible. Humanity's strength lay in its adaptability. And if there was one thing Wolfe knew, it was that Earth's greatest weapon was ingenuity. They didn't have the firepower of the Exocrom, but they could outthink them. "I like it," Wolfe said, nodding slowly. "Let's set it up. We need precision. Gather the fleet." As the fleet began to regroup, Wolfe and his command staff met in the war room. The walls, lined with tactical displays and communication consoles, hummed with activity. The faces around the table were a mixture of concern and determination. They had survived the first wave, but there was no time to celebrate. "General Uriah, what's the status on our fleet?" Wolfe asked, looking over the data that flickered across the table. Uriah tapped his console. "We're holding together, Captain, but our resources are stretched thin. We lost 2 ships in the last engagement, and many of the others are severely damaged. We're running low on supplies. We'll have to make do," Wolfe replied, his voice steely. "I need the fleet in position. We can't let them regroup." He turned to Mira. "I want a full analysis of their flagship. We need to know how it operates from the inside out." "I'm on it," she said, already typing furiously on her console. The room fell silent as the crew focused on their respective tasks. Wolfe stood at the center, watching them work. He knew that time was running out. The Exocrom were preparing for a second assault, one that would likely be more devastating than the first. "We need to hit them hard," Wolfe said after a long pause. "We can't afford to fight them on their terms. We'll force them into a position where they can't retaliate." The plan was risky, but Wolfe trusted his team. He trusted their ability to adapt. They would exploit every weakness, every flaw in the Exocrom strategy. And with this new information about their shielding systems, Wolfe was confident they could pull it off. Hours later, the fleet was in position. The Exocrom were closing in, their ships taking up a formation that indicated they were preparing for a decisive strike. Wolfe's heart raced, but he kept his focus. There was no room for hesitation. "Ready to fire, Captain," Mira's voice came through the comms. "We're set to launch as soon as their shields drop." Wolfe stood at the front of the bridge, his eyes scanning the advancing Exocrom ships. "Hold tight," he murmured. "Let's make them pay for underestimating us." Firing in 3, 2, 1, Mira called. The Vigilant unleashed a barrage of pulse weapons, targeting the gap in the Exocrom shields. The first volley hit its mark. The Exocrom flagship flickered, its shield momentarily drained from the previous energy burst. "Direct hit," Mira shouted. "The flagship shields are down to 20%. Wolfe felt a surge of hope, but he didn't allow himself to relax. "Keep the pressure on them. Fire again." This time, the Vigilant's cannons erupted in unison, sending a second wave of pulses straight at the Exocrom flagship. The impact was devastating. A large section of the ship's outer hull cracked open, revealing its vulnerable core. The flagship shuddered violently. "We've done it." Mira's voice rang out, triumphant. But Wolfe remained calm. He knew this wasn't over. The Exocrom wouldn't go down that easily. As predicted, the Exocrom retaliated, their remaining fleet focusing fire on the Vigilant. The ship rocked under the barrage, alarms blaring as the shields began to flicker. Wolfe's grip tightened on the console. Status, he barked. Shields holding at 30%. Lieutenant Davos reported, sweat dripping down his forehead. We can't take another hit like that. Wolfe didn't have time to think. Prepare the EMP cannons. We're going to disable their weapons. He turned to Mira. We need to make sure they can't retaliate after this. Do whatever you have to, but I need that flagship neutralized. Mira nodded, her fingers flying across her console. I'll do what I can, Captain. The second strike from a Vigilant was a calculated risk. Wolfe's eyes remained locked on the Exocrom flagship as it tried to regroup. The EMP pulse slammed into the flagship, its energy field flickering before collapsing entirely. The flagship shuddered, its weapons systems going dark. EMP successful, Mira confirmed. Their weapons are offline. They won't be able to retaliate. Wolfe allowed himself a brief moment of relief. The Exocrom fleet was reeling. Now they had the upper hand. All ships, focus fire on the flagship. Wolfe commanded. We need to finish this while they're vulnerable. The human fleet fired again, their weapons landing solid hits on the Exocrom flagship. The ship's defenses, already compromised, couldn't keep up with the sustained assault. It was only a matter of time before the flagship would be destroyed. Incoming, Lieutenant Davos shouted, his voice filled with panic. Wolfe turned just in time to see a smaller Exocrom ship darting toward them. It had somehow broken through the line, intent on making a final attempt to take down the Vigilant. Wolfe's mind raced. Mira, how much longer? 5 seconds, she replied, her fingers a blur on the controls. Wolfe didn't hesitate. All ships, protect the Vigilant. The smaller ship fired, its deadly beam cutting through space toward the Vigilant. At the last second, a larger Earth cruiser intercepted the shot, absorbing the blast. The ship shuddered violently, but it stayed intact. The Exocrom flagship exploded in a brilliant burst of light, its destruction sending shockwaves across the battlefield. Wolfe watched as the remains of the once imposing ship drifted in the cold void. The Exocrom fleet, leaderless and disorganized, began to retreat. Victory, Mira said quietly, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. Wolfe didn't smile. He was too focused on what came next. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over. The Exocrom had learned not to underestimate humanity. Wolfe was sure of that. We've won the day, he said, his voice steady. But tomorrow we fight again. End of Chapter 3. Chapter 4. The aftermath of the battle was tense, the silence in the Vigilant's command center almost suffocating. Wolfe stood at the front, staring at the glowing holographic map of the Earth system. The Exocrom fleet had retreated, temporarily, but their damage was done. Several of Earth's ships had been destroyed, and resources were running low. Wolfe's crew had earned a hard-won victory, but it was clear that this war wasn't over. His thoughts were interrupted when Mira Rios approached, her expression unreadable. Captain, we need to talk. I found something. Wolfe turned to her, his gaze sharp. What is it? Mira hesitated for a moment before speaking. I've been going through the communications logs, checking for any anomalies. There's something odd in the data from the Galactic Council. She handed him a data pad, her fingers tapping across the screen. Wolfe's eyes scanned the information. These are encrypted transmissions, Mira continued. They're not from the Exocrom, Captain. They're coming from one of our own. Wolfe's stomach sank as he absorbed the gravity of her words. Who? I don't know yet, but I'm tracing the signal. Whoever it is, they've been feeding intel to the Exocrom. They've known our movements, every ship's position, every tactical decision. Damn it, Wolfe muttered, slamming his fist onto the console. That explains why they've been so precise. They've been one step ahead of us. He exhaled slowly, trying to keep his anger in check. Do you have any leads on the traitor? Mira's face was grim. It's hard to tell. Whoever this is has covered their tracks well. But they're still out there, Captain. And if they've been feeding the Exocrom, they've put Earth's survival in jeopardy. Wolfe nodded, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. Betrayal was always the most dangerous kind of threat. A few hours ago, the Exocrom had been the enemy. Now, he wasn't sure who he could trust. We need to find this mole, and fast, Wolfe said, his voice cold. Get the crew to work on tracking down every communication that's come through the Council network. I want to know who's been in contact with the Exocrom and when. The crew worked tirelessly through the night, trying to piece together the puzzle. Wolfe paced the bridge, his thoughts racing. He knew time was running out. The Exocrom wouldn't be far behind. If this betrayal continued, Earth might not survive the next strike. Captain, Lieutenant Davos's voice broke through his thoughts. We've got something. Wolfe turned sharply, crossing the room in 2 strides. What do you have? Davos pointed to the holo display. A name flickered onto the screen, Counselor Eric Callahan. The communication logs indicated that Callahan, a high-ranking official in the Galactic Council, had exchanged encrypted messages with the Exocrom several times in the past few weeks. Damn it, Wolfe growled, his eyes narrowing. I knew it. Mira, who had been standing by, added, Callahan is one of the most influential members of the Council. If he's been involved in this, it means the traitor is much deeper within the system than we thought. Give me Callahan, Wolfe ordered. The Vigilant Communications officer quickly established a direct link to the counselor's office. The holo display blinked to life, revealing a middle-aged man with graying hair and a hard, calculating look in his eyes. Captain Wolfe. Callahan's voice was smooth, almost too smooth. I was expecting you. Wolfe didn't waste time with pleasantries. You're a traitor. You've been feeding intel to the Exocrom. Callahan's expression didn't change. He simply leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. I don't know what you're talking about. Cut the crap, Wolfe snapped. We've traced the communications. We know you've been in contact with Zorth himself. You've been working with the Exocrom to sabotage Earth's defenses. There was a long pause. Callahan's eyes flickered, but he didn't break. You think you can accuse me without proof? Without considering the bigger picture? The bigger picture? Wolfe shot back. You've endangered the lives of millions of people. You've handed the Exocrom everything they need to destroy Earth. Callahan's lips curled into a smile. You still don't get it, do you? This is bigger than Earth. The Exocrom are the true rulers of this galaxy. They were never meant to be stopped. You're merely a small part of a much larger game. Wolfe's blood boiled, but he kept his composure. I will not let you destroy everything we've fought for. Callahan's gaze hardened, and his voice turned cold. It's already too late for that. The Exocrom will crush Earth, and there's nothing you can do to stop them. With a sharp motion, Wolfe ended the transmission, the anger in his chest turning to resolve. He turned toward his crew, who were waiting anxiously for orders. Prepare for the worst, Wolfe said, his voice low but resolute. We're going to bring Callahan in and make sure he doesn't get another chance to undermine us. We'll stop the Exocrom ourselves. Hours later, as the crew of the Vigilant began executing their plan to confront Callahan and prevent any further sabotage, the situation grew increasingly dire. A high-ranking traitor in the Galactic Council was a severe blow to Earth's defenses, but Wolfe wasn't going to let it destroy them. He had a fleet to command and a planet to protect. Captain, we've confirmed Callahan is still on Council grounds, Mira reported, her voice tense. We can't just drag him out without facing more resistance. We don't have the luxury of time, Wolfe replied, his face hardening. We're going to confront him. If he tries to run, we'll bring him down ourselves. As the Vigilant and its supporting ships approached the Council headquarters, Wolfe's mind was focused on one thing, bringing Callahan to justice. If the counselor thought he could betray humanity and walk away unscathed, he was wrong. When Wolfe boarded the council station with a small team, he found Callahan waiting for him, seated in a plush chair, as if he hadn't a care in the world. Ah, Captain Wolfe, Callahan said, his voice dripping with condescension. I see you've come to do the right thing at last. Wolfe stepped forward, his eyes locked on Callahan's. This ends now. You'll face justice for what you've done. Callahan laughed softly. Justice? From you? You're just a pawn in a much larger game. I've already won. But Wolfe wasn't listening. He stepped closer, his voice low but resolute. The Exocrom may have their plans, but humanity will never be a pawn. We fight for what's ours, and this is far from over. Chapter 5, the command center aboard the Vigilant, was abuzz with activity as Wolfe stood at the heart of all. The traitor was in custody, but the victory felt hollow. There was no time for celebration. The Exocrom were still out there, and they were not going to stop until Earth was destroyed. Wolfe knew this battle was far from over. In fact, the real fight had only just begun. "Captain," Mira Rios's voice cut through his thoughts, her tone urgent. "The Exocrom are massing a second wave. This time, they're not just coming for Earth, they're coming to wipe us off the map." Wolfe's eyes darted to the tactical display. The Exocrom fleet, larger than ever, was moving swiftly toward Earth's outer defenses. The signal showed their ships were already within firing range. The real battle for Earth's survival was about to begin. "They've learned from the last engagement," Wolfe muttered, his gaze fixed on the incoming fleet. "This time, they won't be as vulnerable." "We've got one shot at this," Mira said, her voice steady but tinged with the urgency of the moment. "The fleet's still damaged, and our supplies are low. We can't afford to spread ourselves too thin." Wolfe's mind raced. There had to be something they could use. They didn't have the numbers to match the Exocrom, but they had ingenuity. They had tactics, and above all, they had the will to fight. "Give me General Uriah," Wolfe said. Minutes later, Uriah's gruff voice came over the comms. "Captain, we're ready to deploy. The fleet's patched up, but we won't survive another full-on assault." "What's the plan?" Wolfe stood at the front of the command center, his eyes scanning the hollow map of Earth's defenses. The Exocrom were closing in, and they were organized, too organized for an all-out assault to work. They had no choice but to fight smart. "We can't stop them with sheer force," Wolfe said. "We'll use the terrain to our advantage. Move the fleet into the asteroid belt. We'll use the debris as cover to ambush them. Make them come to us." Uriah's voice crackled through the speaker. "Understood, Captain. We'll begin preparations immediately." Wolfe turned to Mira. "What about the EMP systems?" She nodded. "We're ready. If we can disable their lead ship again, we'll have a chance to disrupt their coordination. Then let's make sure they don't see it coming." The fleet moved into position just outside the asteroid belt. Wolfe stood beside Mira, watching the hollow display closely. The Exocrom fleet was closing in, their ships forming a tight formation as they approached Earth. Wolfe's stomach tightened. This was their last chance. "Get the fleet into cover," he ordered. "We'll wait for the right moment." As the ships moved into position, Wolfe's eyes stayed fixed on the Exocrom. They were too confident. They thought they had Earth cornered. But that arrogance would be their undoing. "All ships, hold your fire until they're in range," Wolfe ordered. "Once they enter the asteroid field, we strike." The seconds felt like hours as Wolfe's crew waited, tension rising with each passing moment. The Exocrom fleet grew closer, their lead ship a massive, imposing vessel at the front of the formation. Wolfe knew if they could disable it, the rest of the fleet would fall into chaos. "Now," Wolfe said, his voice calm but firm. The fleet fired. A torrent of energy beams shot through the dark expanse of space, striking the Exocrom fleet with pinpoint accuracy. The first volley caught the lead ship off guard, its shields flickering as the EMP pulse disabled their weapons. The Exocrom flagship veered off course, its massive bulk tumbling into the asteroid belt. "Direct hit," Mira shouted, a hint of triumph in her voice. "Their shields are down." "Keep it up," Wolfe ordered. "Target the rest of the fleet. No mercy." The Vigilant and the rest of the human ships took advantage of the chaos, firing on the Exocrom ships as they struggled to regain their footing. The asteroid belt, once a hiding place for debris, now became a deadly obstacle. The Exocrom ships tried to maneuver, but they couldn't avoid the incoming fire. One by one, the ships took hits, their shields failing under the sustained assault. "Sir, they're retaliating," Lieutenant Davos called out from the tactical station. "Their counterattack is coming in fast." Wolfe's gaze shifted to the incoming fire. The Exocrom had adapted quickly, but they were still disorganized. They weren't used to fighting in such tight quarters. The debris from the asteroid field was hampering their ability to focus their fire. "We need to finish this now," Wolfe said, his voice tense. "Mira, get the EMP systems ready. We're going after their flagship again." Mira nodded. "Ready on your mark. Take the shot," Wolfe ordered. Another pulse from the Vigilant EMP cannons tore through space, slamming into the Exocrom flagship once more. The ship shuddered violently, its power systems flickering and failing. The Exocrom flagship, now crippled, drifted slowly, helpless against the incoming fire from Earth's fleet. Yes, Mira shouted. It's done. Their flagship is out of commission. Wolfe allowed himself a brief moment of relief, but he knew better than to celebrate just yet. The Exocrom were still formidable. Their fleet, although disorganized, was far from defeated. All ships, keep up the pressure, Wolfe commanded. We finish them now, or we don't get another chance. The battle escalated, each ship in the fleet giving everything they had. The Exocrom, despite their setbacks, weren't ready to surrender. They fought back with everything in their arsenal, but the momentum was shifting. Earth's fleet had found its stride, using the asteroid field to its advantage, outmaneuvering the Exocrom at every turn. As Wolfe observed the battle unfold, he saw a clear path to victory. The Exocrom flagship was barely operational, and their remaining ships were now isolated and vulnerable. Concentrate fire on the remaining Exocrom ships, Wolfe ordered. We're breaking their formation. The final push was swift. The remaining Exocrom ships, unable to maintain their formation or coordinate effectively without their flagship, fell one by one. Wolfe watched as the last Exocrom warship exploded in a bright burst of light, leaving nothing but debris floating in space. The battle was over. Wolfe stood at the bridge, watching the remnants of the Exocrom fleet drift into the void. The hum of the ship's engines had settled into a calm rhythm, but there was no relief in his chest. Earth had won, but the price had been high. Too high. We did it, Captain, Mira said, her voice quieter now, filled with the exhaustion of a hard-fought victory. Wolfe didn't respond right away. He simply stared out into space, the stars stretching out in every direction. We fought for this, he said finally, but it's only the beginning. The galaxy will remember what we did today. You think they'll try again? Mira asked. Wolfe's gaze remained fixed. They'll try, but Earth is no longer the underdog. We've proven we can stand up to them. He turned away from the window, his mind already focused on the next challenge. Prepare the fleet. We've got a future to defend. End of Chapter 5.